have Miss. Fuck, I just forgot your name.
Keri Johnsrud.
I totally know that's your name, and it just blank. I'm like, I was about to call you somebody else. Okay, what's up, guys? Okay, okay, we're back. Yeah, bam. Cut. Okay. What's up, guys? We're at the Rtisan podcast. I have a very special guest, Miss Keri Johnsrud. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I saw you first. Well, met you first at the Green Mill on a random Thursday.
Oh yes.
Yeah. It was you and Amelia.
Amanda.
Why do I call her Amelia? Amelia Earhart. She's
She's
still
no longer
alive.
with us.
Yeah.
I'm sure she was great though.
Yeah, I'm sure she was. And we were just kind of there hanging out. I was like, oh man, she's like super cool. I should probably, get your information one night. And then I didn't talk to you for years. I'm like, oh man, I have a podcast now. And here we are. Boom.
It all happens the way it's supposed to happen.
It does. I actually heard a song of yours on the radio a few months ago. It was WDCB.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, and I have a guy at the gym who also really likes jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened we were listening to the same song that day. And he was like, you should check this out. And I was like, oh man, I was listening to this. And he's just like, he's just a music head, but he really loves jazz.
Uh-huh.
And it was your song. Don't ask me which one it was.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, he was just like, yeah, man. He was like, he couldn't think of your name.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, it's this local girl. She's here. And I'm like, who should be talking? So I'm naming everybody that's not you.
Mm-hmm.
I brought up, everybody's blanking on me right now. Older black lady. She literally played at the D. Yes.
D. Alexander.
Yes. I brought up her and a few other people. He was like, no. He's a black guy. He was like, no, a white girl. And I'm like, what white girl singer can you be talking about? And he pulled it up. And it was you. It was you. Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it is. And I was like, oh man, I know her, man. Like, he was like, yeah, exactly. He was like, oh really? I was like, yeah. I gave him like this, kind of like version of story I just gave about the not the showcase, the Green Mill. That's what it is. Oh, big shout out to the Green Mill and big shout out to Alan Gressick. You're my man. Keep doing great things. I try to plug everybody every now and again.
Of course.
But, yeah.
Thing to do.
Yeah. So, let's get into you. Now I'm done telling my little stories. Where are you from?
I am from a really, really small town.
Okay.
In Iowa.
Oh, Iowa. Yeah.
Yes. Called Conrad.
Never heard of it.
And no, I wouldn't. If you had, I would have been super surprised.
Yeah, that's what's okay.
So I grew up there, and then it's like I said, a small town, like less than 1,000 people, and my family was big into music as well. So that's kind of where I think got the I guess maybe the jazz bug a little bit.
Right.
My mom was a singer. My sister's a singer. My brothers play, trumpet and all that good stuff.
Right.
And so I grew up in a tiny town and then ended up going to school in Iowa City, University of Iowa.
Yes, I know that
Are
place.
you familiar with that place?
Yeah, I am.
It's some good times there.
It is some good times there, man. Woo! Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I like Iowa City.
Yeah, definitely.
So then I ended up going to school there, and just the short story. I went to school there, and then moved right to Chicago right after I graduated. So that's the short end of it. But but when I was at Iowa, I actually didn't study music.
Oh, really?
I was not a music major. I know.
Wow. Did you get the funny looks in the music department?
I was on the DL.
Oh, okay. I did.
I blended in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I tried, Well, because I was involved in a lot of stuff, like different choirs and show choir, and I did take a couple music classes. So, I don't know, people just probably thought I was a music major.
Right, that happens a bit, yeah.
Yeah, so, but I wasn't. I kind of wish I would have studied that.
I just did an interview the other day, and it was with a singer, and one of the questions I asked her was, would, if you were giving advice to a young singer or someone who just wanted to get into music, would you suggest to them that they go to college for music? I mean, you had the fortune of coming from a musical family. She also had lessons a lot. She had piano and voice lessons growing up, but not everybody gets that. And I'm sure you know now, there's a lot of nuanced things that you can miss by not going to music school.
Right.
You said you kind of regret it a little bit?
A little bit. Well, the thing I really wish, the one thing that I think I missed out big time on was like music theory and learning all of that. I mean, I did grow up taking piano lessons and voice lessons too, so I did pick up on theory via that way. But I think that it could have been, if I was immersed in it, it could have made a difference. I think, and so I feel like I'm always catching up.
Right.
To everybody else that knows what they're doing. And I'm like, taking it. So.
You know what? It's so funny because that was the thing that we got to, and it was just like, that's the thing that, you know, that's like the missing link a lot of times for a lot of people who just naturally have the gift. You know, it's like you go into a church and to hear somebody singing in the car next to you, like, man, that person has a great voice. You know, like, well, you should be on the radio, you should be doing, you know what I mean? But a lot of the point I made was, if you don't have certain skills or certain skills that are just undeveloped, you'll always be at the mercy of what somebody kind of serves you.
Right.
You know, and if you don't know what you don't know, then you may not know that there are some things that fit you better. There's some styles of music that you can incorporate and things like that. But the theory thing, man, I saw a lot of people walk out of music school because of the theory stuff, you know. And maybe in some ways it's good that you didn't go through that. I'm not saying you couldn't have done it, you know.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think you're dumb. And I'm not saying that people that don't pass theory are dumb. But I'm telling you, I know some super talented people that cannot get over like basic chord structures and like certain harmony things, you know. Yeah. So maybe it's good you missed out on that.
Maybe. Maybe. Who knows?
Maybe.
But you know.
Yeah, for sure. 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. So.
Exactly. So anyway, that's one thing I have been trying to catch up on. I mean, I've done my own little study since being, a professional, and so I feel relatively confident in my skills now. But yeah, it would have been a lot easier if I think school.
Definitely. So what did you end up studying?
Well, I started out as a pre-med bio major. I know.
Wow. You want to be a doctor or a chemist?
I wasn't really sure.
Okay.
I don't think I really wanted to be a doctor, but my dad is in the medical field, and so he's a pharmacist. So that he was big into all that. So I kind of got into medicine that way, but ended up with a degree in health promotion, which is like health education.
Oh, okay, sure.
And that kind of thing. Like So when I left Iowa and I moved to Chicago, I did work in that field for about 4 years or so, doing various health-related jobs.
Making actual money.
Trying
yeah.
to. You know how it is.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Trying to make ends meet. But but then, but at the same time, I was always, going to jam sessions and open mics and whatever, and it turned out that, staying up until 2, 3 in the morning and then having to get to work by 8 a.m. in the suburbs.
It's rough.
It's tough,
Absolutely.
It's hard. But, so then I was like, you know what, let's just see what I can do. And so I quit my job, and then I ended up just doing temp work for a while, which gave me that flexibility.
Right.
And then just started hitting the ground running and trying to work as hard as I could and trying to make something out of music. So, and here I am today.
Yeah, here we are.
20 years later.
Yeah. So, I mean, were you like absolutely terrified when you because you gave up something. I mean, the medical field is one of the more stable fields, like just working, no matter really what it is. It always seems to be kind of working. There's a lot of, with the way things are, because my mom was a nurse, and with the way things are, there's just a lot of crossover now in the medical field. Do you regret that? I mean, I don't know if that's the right question to ask.
No,
but
I don't regret it, because the whole time, even though I had an interest in medicine, it just wasn't feeding me. You know,
Right.
it wasn't like we were talking about before off camera
Mhm.
that, you know, I always had that pull for
Right.
music, and I
Mhm.
needed to do something with that. And
Right.
so I just knew that music was going to be part of my life somehow, and that the day job stuff, it just wasn't for me.
Right.
I couldn't stand being in a cubicle all day. It was soul sucking for me.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
this for me,
No, I understand.
you know. And so I just really needed to get out there and do some music or do something creative. And
Right.
so I'm like, I don't care. Done. Gonna
Yeah.
go hit,
Yeah.
you know, see what happens. So I wasn't really terrified. I just was like, okay, well, I'll figure this out.
Right. Right.
You know.
So when you made that decision, what was life like for you at first? Because I'm sure, I mean, going to jams and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and I know what it's like, but it's just for what was life like at first? You know, you knew some people,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you probably didn't know enough people to really be gigging 7 nights a week, unless you were doing
Right.
maybe a jobbing band kind of
Right.
thing, which, for a lot of us, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Jackson tunes, Can I Sing, or
Yeah,
just top
right.
40 things,
Mm-hmm.
what was like the first, year and a half, 2 years like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think back. So I spent a lot of time at this place called the Zebra Lounge,
Okay.
and it's a small piano bar. And when I first started out doing this stuff, I wasn't I wanted to do jazz, and that was my focus, but that's not necessarily where I was hanging out or where my musical friends were part
Mhm.
of, or weren't part of that scene necessarily. So I started hanging out at this piano bar, and I met the guy who's the piano player at the joint, and we kind of hit it off, and he kind of took me under his wing like a mentor
Right.
for the first couple years. And excuse me. So I'd go in and I'd just sit in with him and sing, and then he'd kind of hire me on some gigs here and there.
Right.
And then I was off doing my own thing too, but the gigs, just I'd have like one a month,
Right.
or
Right.
one every, just sporadically would have them. And then but then like you said, like, as you get to meet more people and kind of get, like, especially if you're at a place for like a steady sort of situation, you get meet more people, more things start happening. So when I was at the Zebra, I was there probably once a week, just going, sitting in.
Right.
Eventually, I ended up getting my first real professional steady gig there, and it was like 3 months, which at the time was good.
It's pretty good.
For,
Yeah, for a first one. Yeah.
for a first one. And I mean, it's a hole in the wall kind of small place, but it was good for me.
Right.
And so I learned a lot just by meeting musicians there. I mean, the piano player, I didn't know any piano players in town other than the guy who helped me out, but like, people who are interested in the same genre that I was in, I didn't know anyone. So I just put an ad at DePaul, because I lived by DePaul at the time, of like, looking for a piano player,
Right.
kind of thing. And so, because there wasn't Facebook at the time, or there wasn't, any of this like easy way to get in touch with people.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's kind of where it started. I worked with that piano player, and then I knew of a bass player, and so we were like a trio for a little
Right.
bit, and then and then things happen, start to kind of roll out from there. It just takes a lot of patience, a lot of
It does.
time, a lot of like pep talks.
A lot of pep talks. You can do this. You sit in the mirror like, you got this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. It's just like,
Yeah.
because you think, who am I to do all? I mean, at least I was, just like, who am I to
Right.
do all this stuff?
Right.
And I'm just doing it because I like it,
Right.
not thinking anything really more than that. But so that was kind of I'm thinking back, that was kind of the first jump into the scene. And then I can't really remember how it progressed, but I just think by meeting people, going out, going to hear music, meeting musicians that way, having sessions at each other's homes, that kind of, and then
Right.
stuff just finds a way of happening, I guess, that way. So the beginning, that's from what I remember. That's what it was like for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as you're getting out there, as a singer with not a lot of, how can I put this, professional education.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't just want to say, you know, college, because that's still like a relatively new development in music. Like people going to college to learn to play music. Like it used to be you just went and studied under somebody for a long time.
Yeah.
Or you know, back in the day, you know, or early 1900s, you just went to clubs. You just sat in all the time. You just got better. You know. What were some of the things that you had to do, you know, to really start to connect with musicians? Because I'm sure there was some level or some part of you that was like, man, I don't want to embarrass myself. Because it's more than just singing all the right notes, right? Like a lot of us can do that because that's karaoke. You know, like we can go out there. Oh, I know the words. You know, the music starts 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you know we kind of go. What were some of the minute details, like the real like gritty stuff that you didn't know that you wish you had known going into it?
I'm trying to think.
Or even from a business standpoint, right? Like, you know, marketing yourself, whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay. I remember this. I am actually, believe it or not, an introvert.
Okay.
And pretty shy.
Yeah.
And some people would meet me like, that's not even true.
Right.
But really, when it comes to something like this, like when it's so personal for you and you're exposing yourself, you're making yourself extremely vulnerable, that's something that's really hard for me to be like, hey, here I am, hire me, kind of stuff. And so in the beginning, I just remember being this is where terrified comes into play. Just so terrified contacting clubs or contacting musicians that I didn't know to play with me, to have that confidence to be like, okay, I think I'm at this point where I really know where I know what I'm doing. I mean, I don't know everything, but I know pretty much what's going on. But because back in the day, you'd actually have to call clubs, or you know, there wasn't even email really back when I started. Or I'd have to send a press kit, like a physical press kit with a cover letter to these clubs, and you know, that's you know, I was just putting all that together and calling clubs and calling people to convince them to hire me was I wish at that time I felt I had the more confidence in myself to be like, okay, you're gonna be okay, you can do this. That was the one thing that I think I wish I would have known then I wish I would have known what I know now, that just it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine, you know, because you don't realize that there are hundreds of people doing the same thing. Right. Exactly the same thing.
Hundreds.
I know.
Probably thousands. Yeah.
But you feel like you're the only person doing this, and that you're all by yourself, and you're not. There's so many resources and people around to help. And I wish I would have taken more advantage of that. You know, just asking questions and you know, just not being afraid of you know, just going for it. Because I think that's something that I still haven't quite completely gotten over. Excuse me. There's still that shyness, or that I guess insecurity a little bit. That still stays with me, and so I kept doing things like by baby steps, like just a little bit here, a little bit there, which for me, I guess that's how I wanted to do things. But I see kids today that are in this industry that are boom, let's just go for it, and they dive in, and they're like just going for it, and which is great, which is
well, absolutely, you kind of have to be irrationally confident.
Yeah, exactly. So but I guess that would be kind of the biggest thing for me. I wish I would have known, is that it's gonna be okay no matter what you do.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of anything else like specific. regard, I don't.
Well, let me ask you a question then.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I'll openly admit to you, as a musician, as a professionally trained musician, who did extremely well in theory and oral skills and all these other things, and have been playing. A lot of times, I ran into singers who didn't have the same skill set as me, you know, or they didn't know as much about the language or the culture in jazz, and they would. I felt like some of these kids would show up, you know, especially the ones who weren't jazz singers specifically. They kind of did soul, R&B, or whatever, and because they had a great voice, they'd be like, "Oh, I can do it," you know. And you know, some of them would show up only being able to sing in certain keys, you know. And it's always frustrating to musicians. It's like, here you go, you know.
Yeah.
How were you received initially as, you know, a singer? Did you feel like an outsider to the musicians club? Because it can kind of be clubbish and it can kind of be cultish sometimes.
Sure.
You know, how did you kind of, you know, make your way into that scene? I'll call it. I'll be nice. Call it scene. Yeah.
Well, you know, I don't know. I guess I never felt excluded or never felt like what I was doing was incorrect. Like I had a pretty good understanding, but going into it, of like, of course, I know form. I know I know what keys I do my songs in, and that's just something I don't know. Maybe I learned that from like my voice coach that I had, or just by listening. I did a lot of listening to people and listening to not even just live, but you know, just recordings like we all do. And then Gary, I think was Gary, who's my mentor from the Zero Lounge. He was helpful too initially, just you know, with a couple hints. But I think I had a pretty good intuition as to like what to do and what not to do based on all of those ingredients. Because I never felt like, or at least, I mean, no one said it to my face anyway. But I never got a vibe or feeling that, you know, oh, she doesn't know what she's doing, or she think, you know. Luckily, I never felt that way. So maybe I was doing something right initially. But you know, there's always stuff that you can pick up and learn. You know, like one thing, for instance, when I was first starting out, just specifically Gary Phillip is his name. He said to me, which is something you probably learn in music school or not, or maybe you just learn as a vocalist just by being on the scene, is that, you know, just when it comes to improvisation, he's like, just sing the song how it's meant to be sung, at least the first time through. Just Just sing it like
get everybody in. Yeah, absolutely.
Don't go crazy the first time through. Just sing the song. And then the second time through, you can go do your improvisation, scatting, whatever you want to do. So that was like that was actually a big help, you know, piece of advice.
Sure it is.
Starting out, and I'm trying to think what else, but everything else I think it just, you know, by working one-on-one with people, like with Gary or with my voice coach that I had, I think they must have instilled that in me as to what to expect, what not to do, when you're on the scene, when you're being a professional. So, yeah.
You know what? I'm glad you didn't go through that, because a lot of things that I suffer from is because I feel like sometimes I know too much. And one of the things that I think all professionals suffer from on some level is wanting to appease their peers.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And that it's a healthy thing to a point, right? Because you want your peers to want to work with you. You want to be the kind, especially if you're not making millions of dollars, where you can just throw money at it and be like, you're going to come play with me because I'm going to hand you a check. You know what I mean? Like, it's, Ellington called it a gimmick. Like, my gimmick is I pay them. You know, like, that was his thing. And, like, absolutely. But if you're not there yet, as you're climbing the ladder, you definitely want to be somebody that people want to work with. And that's for a lot of different reasons. You want to be a good hang. You want to be able to speak the language, you know, from a scene standpoint and from a jazz standpoint. You know, like, okay, you can sing the tunes. Can you scat? You know what I mean? Can we depend on you to take? You know, it's kind of it's a little weird for vocalists sometimes, but can you scat 2 choruses on a blues? You know, like that's a real thing, or like a simple rhythm changes kind of thing. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but just type in rhythm changes on YouTube. There's 1,000 videos explaining what it is. You know, that stuff is important. You know, because it gives you credibility. You know, and it makes people want to suggest you to other people who are like, hey man, I know somebody else that might be looking for a singer to just come in and sit in on a set. You know, because it's invaluable to have that. You know, especially if it's a coffee house gig or just if it's any gig, it's always great to have somebody to come in and offer up a change of pace, and the singer really does that. Especially if it's like just horns playing or it's just piano and bass and drums. To have somebody coming in singing, you know, a ballad. Yeah. That if you haven't heard that for like the previous 45 minutes and then somebody comes in and they crush you, you're like, oh my God, this is like great. You know, it changes the whole vibe up. Yeah. But I know, like myself and a lot of other musicians is like, oh man, you know, I don't want to sound dumb. You know, I want to make sure I'm playing all the right notes and things like that. Yeah. You know, so maybe there's some sort of, for you, there was some sort of ignorance is bliss kind of thing.
I think so. Yeah, a little bit. Because, like I said, I just knew what I knew. Right. And just did what I did. For sure. And it wasn't always correct. Right. But I think it was correct enough times that it, you know, they were like, all right, cool, that's cool, whatever, you know. Like right. All right, okay. So yeah, I think it's just trusting your gut and knowing that you just do you.
Absolutely, no, that's a great point. That's a really great point. Just
be confident. Confidence is huge, which is I'm always working on that. But just to know that what you've got is different than anyone else has. I mean, I don't sound like you. You don't sound like me. I don't sound like, you know, whoever else is out there. You know, we all have our unique voices. And yeah, I mean, there is that part of us where we kind of want to, you know, prove ourselves. Right. But I mean, I think the best way to prove yourself is just to go out there and just do what you do what you know, and you know, you'll find a crowd, you'll find a niche or you know, a segment of population that'll gravitate towards that.
For sure. Know?
So just let it be.
No, that's gospel. That's gospel right there. And with that, we're gonna take a real quick break, and then we're gonna come right back to you.
It's beyond outtakes.
Exactly. All right, guys, welcome back to the Rtisan Podcast. We're back here with Keri, and we got some new questions I'm going to throw her way that I did not prep her for. So we're going to see how she responds to them. So all of us have a library of sounds that exists within our head. So we have our natural ability, and we try to match that natural ability with the things that we kind of hear every day. You said you did a lot of listening. Who were some of your early influences?
Let's see. I mean, I think I started off with, you know, the vocalists that a lot of people listen to initially, like Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, and that kind of thing, and Mel Torme, I guess. But before I started really listening to vocalists, I listened to my oldest brother. I'm sorry. Kind of backtracking. Okay. My oldest brother was really into music, and he was actually really into jazz, and he kind of introduced me to some people who this is who you should be listening to, kind of thing. And but he actually turned me on to Chuck Mangione, which I know some people have their opinions about him, but he was a jazz messenger, right? Yeah. So that kind of sparked the idea of kind of like fusion, like jazz fusion, and you know, dipping my toe into that kind of listening arena. So from, you know, Chuck, I listened to like Jocko, I listened to Herbie, you know, like all that era, of jazz musicians. But when later in life, when I started to I wanted to listen to, you know, other vocalists, like listen for phrasing, listen for other things, like listen to, you know, how the interaction is between a vocalist and an instrumentalist.
Right.
And so let's see, I listened to a lot of Shirley Horn, and let's see, who else did I listen to? Oh goodness, Nancy Wilson. You know, all of the greats.
Yeah.
And you know, I listened to you know, Hank Jones and Clark Terry and just whoever I could get my hands on.
Right.
Just to listen to see how they do what they do, and you know, just listen to, okay, what can I do? I'm not trying to copy them, but I'm just saying, like, how can I incorporate what they're doing into what I'm doing, and how to tell a story, how to tell my story or my interpretation of the story based on, you know, what the people before me have done.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's
Absolutely.
how you learn. So yeah, it kind of went all over, and then of course, you know, when I was in maybe high school, I listened to a lot of pop music. I listened to like Billy Joel and I don't know, just a bunch of different bands and stuff, and that too also has an influence on me because only a few years ago I started writing my own music, and so you know, I'd kind of reference those people for when I was trying to, you know, write some stuff out and figure out what I wanted to do, and so it's kind of come from all over the place. And then also, especially when I'm writing my own stuff, not only would I listen to musicians, but I listen to just nature and stuff around me, like how are the birds interacting with other birds, or how, you know, how is this wind chime that's in the distance, how is that interacting with the wind, and you know, just kind of stuff like that. So that's kind of a very long answer to your question.
No,
but,
it's a great answer though.
But yeah, so just all anything and everything I could listen to.
Right.
Listen to.
So what do you tend to gravitate towards now? Because I find myself sometimes in the same listening patterns. You know, like I listen to probably too much Charlie Parker. You know, and that language informs the way that I tend to go about things. You know, just like in general. And you know, I listened to a Sonny Rollins interview years ago, and I came across it again, and he was talking about himself and Miles Davis and how they never wanted to be dinosaurs, but I feel like me personally, like that's all I listen to is the dinosaurs, you know, like all the old guys, and I'm like, man, should I be doing this and that and blah 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 blah, but have you yourself, now that you're creating your own music, have you yourself dealt with that that sort of like tug between like the old ways and like contemporary music?
Yeah, I have, and that's a good point to bring up, because and this can go like in many different directions, so I'll try and keep it focused, but I really think it's important, obviously, to listen to the people who came before us and kind of set the precedent for this music, and to learn from them and the innovators of their time to get ideas. But the thing is that you have to remember, is like those people, when they were creating that music, that was like the pop music, that was the modern music of that time.
Right.
So for us to, I mean, this is by no means meant to be a dig at all, because I love standards, I love jazz and all that, but I have a feeling that if Miles was alive today, or Charlie was alive today, and he would hear us still playing the same old songs over and over in the same way, he'd be like, fools, like, come on, let's move, let's go, because they wouldn't be playing that stuff today, they'd be creating more stuff today to play, like more whatever fit the time period of whenever they lived. And so I did struggle with that for a while, because I love that music, and I love listening to them, and I like learning from them, and I'm like, of course you want to keep this music alive, but I think a good way to keep this music alive is to also move with the music. You gotta move with what's going on in the world today, and making music accordingly to where you are in your life today. I think that's only really to kind of move this music forward and to, you know, keep this genre vibrant and exciting and I don't know. Yeah, I guess like I said, I can go off on a tangent on this, but
Right.
but yeah, it's, you know, I think it's important to listen to that, but also not be afraid to create new music within this genre.
Definitely.
You know, does that make sense?
No, I'm with you 1,000%. I guess I'm somewhat of a postmodernist by nature now because of the time that I live in, and the stuff that I like to listen to is just inherently old now. I guess in the greater scheme of things, it's really not that old. But you know, for years I used to tease classical cats for playing Mozart, and I love Mozart and Beethoven. I love those dudes, but I would tease them so often for doing, you know, playing the same songs over and over again. You know, it's like, man, we've heard this.
Yeah.
And I realized, you know, actually listening to cats my own age and younger than me going out and doing things, even with it, I'm not even talking about pop music necessarily, even within the same sort of framework of what acoustic jazz music framework, you know, it's like they're doing newer things. I'm like, oh man, I'm the old dude. You know what I mean? Like, I'm the one still wanting to do, you know, the Ellington stuff and do like these recreation of like Count Basie and stuff like that. And I love it. And I have no qualms about that. Like, personally, none whatsoever. However, I do have to think about like what, because it does matter to me on some level. Maybe this is vanity speaking. It does matter to me on some level what I'm giving back to the music. Yeah. And I do think on some level that's something that we do need to consider as artists, because it would be wrong of us to force the same stuff. You know, I don't know if you have one, but like this is a music school thing. One of the first things you do once you get to college is you buy the 6th edition real book.
Oh yeah.
You know, and you know everybody kind of has it, and you get it in your key, you know, your B flat C, you know, bass clef, whatever. And you know it becomes the Bible.
Right.
As a trombonist, you know, you get an Arbenz book, and the Arbenz book is like the Bible, and you play through that stuff constantly, man. So that becomes like your base of information. Yeah. But damn, man, like we gotta get new stuff.
Oh,
we gotta get, and I feel like that's why people haven't sort of maybe gravitated towards us a little bit, because on some level, as artists, we do have to challenge the people. We do kind of have to meet them halfway. You know what I mean? We do have to give them something fresh, even if it's a fresh interpretation of something that's 100 years old.
Right, exactly.
You know?
Well, yeah, because the thing is that if you think about it from a professional standpoint, you got to think about your audience too.
Yes.
And so your audience, the people who like that music from the 40s and 30s, I mean, I still like it, but like the majority of the population who like that, they're dying.
Yes.
They're no longer, a lot of them are no longer around.
Right.
And so the younger generation isn't always too familiar with that type of music.
Right.
And quite frankly, a lot of them don't care, unfortunately.
Man, that's real.
Yeah, they don't. And so, but when you play something like a Sting tune, or you play, you know, like your version of a, you know, I don't know, Rolling Stones tune or whatever, they're like, their ears perk up, like, oh, because they have a connection to it. They have a familiarity to it. And so, or if you write a song that's got some groove to it that is, you know, that people can relate to, I think that's, like, if you want to kind of bring more of an audience, or, you know, try and keep an audience coming, I think that's the direction I think a lot of people might have to consider going. Not saying you have to completely dismiss, you know, the real book stuff or the music that we grew up listening to, or the, you know, stuff from the 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever. Right. But, you know, it's, you know, we've got to try and keep progressing and keep moving forward, like I said before, with you know, what we're doing.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny you say that. I 100% agree with you.
Okay.
And, you know, 30 years ago, probably, you could get away with doing a lot of the standards because the grandparents of that era, or even maybe the just older people, I'm going to just say 40 plus, they would know those tunes just because they're not that far removed from it. But now, a lot of those people that show up to our gigs, you know, like I said, usually most jazz gigs that aren't in a restaurant or something like that, if you're coming to hear jazz, most of the people are now 40 and up.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe even 50 and up, really. And a lot of that stuff that they connect with is like kind of classic rock. It's like late 60s, 70s, even early 80s classic rock. That was kind of like their heyday music. And I never really thought about doing it. But I saw my friend play the other day, and he did Music Makes the World Go Round. And when did that come out, in the 70s, I want to say, something like that. But all the older people dug it instantly. And it was because it reminded them of something. Just like, probably all those World War Era II big band songs that you would have been doing 30 years ago really connected with people and it made them feel, oh my God. Exactly. I remember my grandmother and my granddad used to dance to this in the living room. It's like, yes, I want you to do that.
Yeah.
But man, that's such a good point. Maybe we should be doing some Sting. Maybe we should be doing some version of like AC/DC or Sabbath, whoever, whatever, Sonny and Cher even, I don't know any of their music, but I'm sure somebody does. So, that's a very interesting point.
Yeah.
And if we're being honest, jazz musicians did that all the time. They took, I feel like a third of the standards that we know all came from musicals.
Oh, they did, for sure.
You know what I mean? And that might be on the low end. It might even be close to like 40. I was sitting at 40, 50%. But our musicals and all the music from that era that they were just like, oh man, I play jazz, but I'll do it. You know what I mean? Because I was lucky enough to interview Benny Green.
Oh, nice.
And Oscar Peterson told him, like, whenever you start a show, the first couple songs should be something to like draw the people in. And I think he was talking about like a groove tune or like a blues, because those dominant 7 chords are they're universal and everybody can kind of get with it, especially if it's like moving a little bit. People love it. Yeah. But I also think that can be, why don't you do something that everybody knows? Yeah. Like Living on a Prayer. You know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe you don't want to start with that. Maybe you want to end with that, but something like that. Yeah. Everybody can kind of, he's singing they're playing the bridge, and they can all sing along with you, And it's like, it tears down it breaks that, I don't know, I don't want to say the wall, but whatever that thing is, if people don't really know you, and you're like presenting yourself to them for the first time, it's like, oh, he gets it. Whatever that thing is, and then you see them smiling, it's like, okay, I got him. Yeah. Whatever that thing is, it's like, I got you, man. So I think that's a great point by you. Yeah. I love that. I am going to start doing that. From now on, I'm going to learn one pop tune or maybe two and just interject it somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think because people aren't necessarily expecting it.
Right.
And when they hear it, it throws them off. It's a pleasant surprise.
Right.
And they're like, oh yes, I remember that. Like you said, it invokes like some kind of memory. Like, oh, I remember going to the swimming pool listening to this song or whatever, the situation may be. But I think that's kind of the world we're living in as far world we're living in as far as jazz is concerned. I think, it also has to be something that you enjoy doing too. I mean, it can't be. You have to still have a connection to the music as well. Otherwise, it doesn't come off as authentic, and people can see right through that.
Oh my God, absolutely!
They can just know when you're phoning it in.
Yeah.
I've done that. I'm guilty of that.
For sure, man.
Totally,
for sure.
But it's. I think that's if you can just play music you love and play it the way makes you feel good, then I think people will be attracted to that.
I agree. I agree 1,000%, man. So that's a lesson for all you young cats out there. Don't be afraid to do something to get people in, to draw them in a little bit. Like I said, I just learned something very valuable just then. I usually would use like I said, I would use like a blues or Chameleon or something like that because everybody played Chameleon in high school. That's kind of like the song everybody kind of knows, and it's funky, but definitely, man, definitely. And, I don't know why I was so resistant to it. You have guys like Roy Hargrove and Glasper and all these other people borrowing from the stuff that they grew up listening to and using pop influences in their music, and it's still super jazzy. And I don't know how I feel about that term necessarily, you know what I mean? But I do appreciate it from the standpoint that not everybody's into jazz, but everybody loves music.
Right, exactly.
And if we can, like I said, if I can meet you halfway by jazzing up once again. Somebody is rolling over in their grave by me saying that, but like, you know, jazzing up a pop tune, then yeah, I definitely think we should do that.
Yeah, I think it's not a bad idea.
Definitely Keri dropping gems. Okay. So for you now, we kind of got into what got you here and what you like to listen to. What are your plans for the future, like musically, or what would you like to, you know, kind of accomplish?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's very broad, but I think still kind of specific is that I've kind of hung up the songwriting thing for like a year or two, and so I'm getting the bug to write again.
Right.
And so that's gonna, I think, be my next focus.
Okay.
Is starting to write more stuff and you know, what we just talked about, incorporating more of I don't know, some modern. I don't want to say modern feel. Whatever. I'm just gonna do what I do. But just writing more original stuff. And I've had a couple little projects here and there that I'm not really huge into tribute stuff, but I've been working on a couple of projects that are kind of like that. The first project was an album I recorded with. He's a piano player based out of Atlanta, and we've worked together before. But we got together and collaborated on this album that features all music written by Fred Rogers, or Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
And so we decided to do that album because nobody knew that, or not nobody, but a lot of people didn't know that Fred Rogers was a composer. They look at him as a children's television host.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and he wrote like over 200 songs and like 13 operas and was super. I know, he was super, and he got his degree in music down at Rollins College in Florida, and but he ended up studying becoming an ordained minister, Presbyterian minister, and then studied child psychology. So that's more the direction he went. But anyway, so yeah, a lot of people didn't know that he actually was a musician.
Yeah.
And so we really wanted to bring that to light. And so we recorded an album last year in about 10, 11 songs that we just thought, or I just thought that, okay, yeah, we do this project, as with a lot of albums or projects that you do. You record it, you know, you put it out, it has legs for maybe like 6 months to a year, whatever, you know.
You work on the next thing. Yeah. Absolutely.
But this one, I think just for the nature of the content and because of, there was like a bunch of anniversary stuff happening around Fred Rogers. Like it was the 50th anniversary of his show and the 15th anniversary of his death and his 90th birthday. Like all this happened in 1 year.
Right.
And now they made a documentary and now they're making a movie. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of sustaining this project.
Right.
And so we're still out touring with it and performing with
absolutely.
it. So there's even talks of maybe doing a volume 2 because there's a lot of music to cover. But so anyway, so that's something that is kind of simmers right here. We're kind of always doing something with that.
Absolutely.
And then what else am I doing? Well, just diving into new music learning. Like speaking of older musicians, I've actually really started to listen a lot more to like Charles Mingus and to listen to his compositions. And he was, I didn't know this much about this part about him, but I didn't realize how like a prolific poet he was. Like his poetry is amazing, and him setting music to that poetry is just, it's beautiful. And so anyway, so I've been really just kind of digging into that material, just listening to it and getting inspiration from it. And so that's kind of it right now, just and then performing at our little steady at Andy's that we've got. So when
are you performing? You have a weekly at Andy's, or
yeah, weekly. We're there. We're now there on Saturdays, the early set, so from 5 to 8:30.
So that's Andy's Jazz Club.
Yeah.
For those that don't know. Yeah.
Downtown. Not Andy's the restaurant. not the Mediterranean
What is it?
restaurant.
Is it 52 East Hubbard?
11.
11's, okay.
11
Okay.
State and Hubbard.
Okay.
So yeah, sometimes when I say Andy's, they think it's the Mediterranean restaurant. That's like an Asian
okay.
restaurant. Nope, it's the Jazz Club. Yeah, so that's it. I think just writing is really my main focus right now.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question.
Okay.
What do you want to get out of music? A lot of us are here for a lot of different reasons, and I haven't exactly nailed mine down yet.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that I just enjoy being an artist, which to a lot of people that don't do what we do just sounds like the most hippie thing in the world to say, and I'm okay with that. But what do you want? You know, like obviously you want to be able to eat every day,
right?
Which is a struggle sometimes, guys. I'm gonna just be honest. But what does when you know we're reading your when you're giving your speech to somebody, or when we're reading your bio, or whatever, what do you want people to be able to say about Keri?
Well, I think with the music thing, what I want to get out of the music and what I want to send forth is, I'm still learning that. I'm still trying to figure that out. But I mean, ultimately, we're in this for to bring joy and to spread goodness, in a different medium. I think, and that's something I've really had to think about. As far as like, what do I want to get out of this profession? Why am I doing what I'm doing?
Right.
And I really think it is I do get some fulfillment out of, up there performing and singing in front of an audience and get that energy. And it's kind of a selfish thing. Sure. But
you have to be fulfilled somehow.
Yeah. But the music itself brings joy to me. But ultimately, and you don't really know this until people say something to you, at least I don't, is that what we do actually literally does affect other people. Right. And you don't know somebody, I had someone come up to me, this was like a month or so ago, we were doing our thing at Andy's, and you're just up there, you're doing your thing, and then afterwards he came up to me and he's just like, you have no idea how much your music meant to me tonight. Right. Like, he was having a really hard day. He was just really, it's kind of the same old story we hear a lot, but you kind of forget about it. Right. That having that connection, a human connection, and with another audience member or band member, or just, I think, really being able to tell a story and knowing that someone out there is listening and they can relate to that story, and it does affect people and it does make a difference to somebody, is I think kind of the main thing of why we do this, or why we do any art medium, is just for expression and to create joy and to tell a story. And I think that's why I do what I do, why we do what we do.
Absolutely.
It seems like, I feel like it's kind of a broken record, but it's really the truth.
Yeah, definitely. We're givers by nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
So that's, I think.
That's very altruistic of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I try to be positive.
Yeah. You definitely got to be, especially in this business. It'll beat you down.
Yeah, well, because it's true. It does. It's like, there are many days when I'm sitting at home crying. I'm like, why am I doing this? But you realize that there's a purpose for what you do.
Absolutely.
Everybody has a purpose, but there is a reason why you have this drive, or you have this passion for this art form, or for whatever it is you decide to do. There's a reason why you have that fire inside of you, and you are meant. I feel that if you have that, you are meant to do that, whatever it is, whether it's doing music or art, or being a businessman or whatever it is. Absolutely. You just gotta pay attention to that and just understand, like, how to create a positive, I guess, environment or a situation for whatever it is you do. Like, just send good vibes out there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's all real. That's all
Yeah.
real. All right, guys. I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank Keri for coming out. I really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Hopefully, I hear some more of your music on WDCB.
Oh.
That'd be really cool. And where can we find your music?
Well, kind of the usual places. My website primarily, and that's Keri Keri Johnsrud JOHNSRUD.com. And
Fantastic.
yeah.
You on Instagram and whatnot?
Yeah, Instagram, Facebook. I can't remember what my handles
It's
are
all right.
though.
I'll look it up and I'll
Yeah.
find you and I'll link everything.
Yeah.
So they
Okay.
can give you the clicks and likes and stuff
Okay.
like that. The listens.
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure for me to be able to bring really cool and interesting people and present them to you in the best way that I know how. So we have a lot more content coming. I just did an interview with Mariah Nicole. Her EP release was yesterday, so I'm actually going to link that. You can check that out as well. But like I said, much more stuff coming in the future, and thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.